Welcome everyone who's just joining us. We'll get started in a few minutes. I welcome you. If you know the Indigenous lands where you are zooming in from, you're welcome to share the names of the Indigenous peoples or their territories in the chat, as well as your name, what congregation or community you represent, and anything else that you'd like to share with us by way of introduction. We have about 60 people registered for tonight. I wish we could go around and share more intimate introductions with everyone on the call to get to know you better, but for the time being, we'll just be sharing in the chat with your name of your congregation or the community you represent, and the Indigenous territories where you live. So welcome folks just joining us. We'll go ahead and get started in another minute or two. Great to see you, Jeannie, Joan, John, Dale, Sylvia, Barry, Myrna, some new faces here. Mary, Becky Jansen, Susan, Raylene, Lois, too many folks to name. I invite you, if you're able, to put yourselves on mute, at least for now. We're going to be doing some sharing time later, but just for the sake of listening, if you can make sure that you are muted for now, that'd be great. Welcome, folks. We're just sharing names and introductions in the chat with your name where you are, of the congregation or community you're representing, as well as if you know the Indigenous territories where you live. Welcome. And we'll go ahead and get started here tonight. My name is Katerina Haya, and I'm the organizer for the Repair Network. We are part of the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery, and we join together on these quarterly calls 4 times a year. This is the first of 2023. We join together to share resources, stories, prayers, calls to action from Indigenous communities, both locally as well as globally. We gather to share opportunities for reparative action, to deepen our solidarity and our commitments to the journey of decolonization. We are following 7 steps that are available on our website, dofdmeno.org, 7 steps of repair. And those are a loose framework that we gather around of seeking restorative justice, seeking repair for the harms of the doctrine of discovery, and really trying to organize as a church community in the name of Christ to address the harms, the violence that's been done under the doctrine of discovery in the name of Christ. We have over 30 church communities in our repair network, about 20 of which have officially joined, and others that are considering and are prospective members. And I want to welcome those for whom this is your first gathering tonight. Welcome. If you didn't catch my introduction, I'm Katerina Haya and the organizer of this network. I'm just going to stop sharing so we can see the faces on the screen tonight. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I want to especially welcome some new communities tonight. Assembly Mennonite Church in Goshen has joined us since our last quarterly call, and Boulder Mennonite Church in Colorado. And I'm wondering if any representatives from either congregation, Assembly or Boulder, could just unmute yourselves to say a quick hello and introduction. So any folks from Assembly, I'm seeing.
I am John Blosser, and I'm from Assembly Mennonite Church.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm from Assembly. I'm Ann Berkey from Assembly.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Ann.
I'm Barb Hassan, also from Assembly. And we've had the second in a series of stories from our Miami and Potawatomi tribal members. So we're having a good time and learning a lot.
That's wonderful. So good to hear. Anyone from Boulder Mennonite Church joining us today? looks like no one yet from Boulder Mennonite, but just want to say a word of welcome to Assembly and Boulder as our newest Repair Network members who've officially joined. And we also want to welcome communities who are exploring the Repair Network. For the first time this year, we're actually opening up the network beyond the Mennonite Church USA congregations and communities that we started with. In our first year and a half of building the network, we wanted to start with a base that we were most familiar with, since our coalition was founded and kind of originated, sprouted out of the Mennonite Church with strong connections with Mennonite Church USA. We started building the Repair Network there, but decided late last year to extend the invitation to anyone who wants to join us. If they are part of communities or congregations who want to move from education to the next steps in community with other groups. So tonight, I know we have someone from an Episcopal church that reached out to us and perhaps others. We also welcome Estuary Church from across the colonial border in Canada, the first Canadian congregation that's exploring and just learning more about the Repair Network. So we're glad that you can join us. And for those who just joined, please share any introductions and the Indigenous territories where you live in the chat. We'll be taking some time later on this call to share some updates from our coalition, and then we'll move into breakout rooms so that you can share some stories with one another about what you're up to, what you're learning on the ground, challenges that you're encountering, ways to support each other. And I'll just share my screen to share the agenda for our time today. I want to start us off with prayer tonight. Let me just share this screen here. Sorry about that. We want to start off with prayer, especially for ICWA, as ICWA is being deliberated right now, the Indian Child Welfare Act in the Supreme Court. So we want to start off with some words of prayer in protection of ICWA. And then we'll hear from Busy Feeks, who's a member of the Protect ICWA subcommittee, about why ICWA matters for her as an Indigenous woman. And then we'll be sharing some updates from Apache Stronghold and other updates from our coalition and Indigenous partners. And then I'll be sending you all out into breakout rooms so that you can share in small groups about the work of your community. Then during our second hour, we'll transition to a time of learning from an Indigenous resource person, Deidre Whiteman, from the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, about how we can support a Truth and Healing Commission on Native American boarding schools. So I welcome any questions in the chat. Michaela Esau, who's our Mennonite Voluntary Service Communications Coordinator and Indigenous Solidarity Organizer, will be fielding the chat for just any questions or clarification, and we'll also be helping out with some updates from Apache Stronghold tonight. So let's just take a moment to center ourselves in prayer, especially for ICWA, or the Indian Child Welfare Act. I want to just take a moment, a breath together, as we call to mind perhaps work that you all have been doing as part of this Repair Network, as we await a decision from the Supreme Court over the Indian Child Welfare Act, really crucial civil rights legislation passed in the 1970s to protect tribal sovereignty in determining child welfare cases, whether or not where children would be placed who come from Indigenous communities. And they were seeing high rates of assimilation as children were being adopted out of their tribes, out of their home communities, largely into white foster and adoptive care settings. And we're seeing the impacts of loss of language and culture, and really an extension of the boarding school era. And so this legislation, the Indian Child Welfare Act, was passed to protect Indigenous children being able to be raised in their own home communities and given preference or priority for that. And so we've been supporting Indigenous-led organizations who are defending ICWA. all the way up to the Supreme Court level where it's being challenged right now and is still in deliberation. So I invite you to raise your hand if you've participated in some form of support for ICWA, whether prayer, an educational event, or maybe even attending the gathering at the Supreme Court in the US with other Indigenous groups. So go ahead and raise your hands if you have participated in some way in supporting ICWA. It looks like an amazing amount of people. That is so wonderful to hear. We've been really seeking to shape the narrative around ICWA, especially as largely Christian communities, knowing that it's often Christian families, especially white Christian families, who are shaping this narrative around reverse racism, saying they're being discriminated against if they can't adopt Indigenous children into their homes and families. So that's really being used right now by conservative legal groups to challenge ICWA for much larger political reasons. So we're trying to come in as a coalition, educate our communities, share support for Indigenous organizations defending Indigenous rights and tribal sovereignty. I'll be sharing in email, so look for it, with talking points about ICWA. One of the big parts of shaping the narrative is just talking about it, spreading the word, as well as some Sunday school lesson plans that our committee has been developing as part of the coalition. But before we jump into sharing more about ICWA and hearing from Busy, I just wanted to take some time, since prayer is the spiritual core of our movement, to really pray together. I've created a way for us to pray collectively, virtually, through this prayer wall. And I'll put a link in the chat to that virtual prayer wall for ICWA. I invite you, if you're able to view it, we'll take some moments in silence, and maybe, Michaela, if you're actually able to play that song, "O Healing River," that you were playing as we first started, an excerpt from a traditional hymn that's in Voices Together. I welcome you to play that as we pray together for ICWA, and I'll just share my screen here so that we can see the prayers as they're being submitted through the link in the chat. It's through this poll. The first prayer that's come in is already pasted here as an example. If you're able to share a prayer, feel free. We'll take a few minutes to pray.
Upon this land, oh healing river, send down your waters and wash the blood from off of the sand. This land is parching, this land is burning. No seed is growing in this barren ground. Oh, healing river, send down your waters. Oh, healing river, send your waters down. Let the seed of freedom awake and flourish. Let the deep roots nourish. Let the tall stalks rise. Let her rise, let her rise. Oh, healing river, send down your waters. Oh, healing river, from out of
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your invitations to prayer, sharing your prayers on this prayer wall. I'll go ahead and present it here to just see some of the prayers that have come up as the Supreme Court deliberates this decision around ICWA. And I'll read some of them out loud. Loving parent, I pray for the Supreme Court justices as they determine whether or not to overturn ICWA, for their wisdom, for a special concern for Indigenous children's well-being, for understanding the impacts of colonization. Hear our prayer. For the clarity and truth of Indigenous peoples to hold fast the hearts and minds of SCOTUS. Lord, have mercy. May healing waters and justice flow. Creator, have mercy. I pray that regardless of the outcome of the Supreme Court's decision, Christian communities will continue to stand with, labor with, and support Indigenous peoples in the pursuit of reclaiming their sovereignty. Hear our prayers. O Great Spirit, we pray that the hearts and minds of the Supreme Court justices will, I imagine, will be softened, will be transformed. We'll listen to the pleas of our people. Creator, hear our prayers, spoken and unspoken, written and unwritten. May your kingdom come. Amen. Now I'd like to transition just to a time of hearing from Busy Feeks, who I shared earlier as a member. I met Busy at the annual coalition gathering this past summer in 2022, and she joined our Protect ICWA subcommittee because of what ICWA means to her. So I've invited Busy to introduce herself and to just share a little bit about why ICWA matters.
Thank you, Katerina. Yeah, like she said, my name is Busy. I'm calling in from the land of the Coast Salish people, the Duwamish people most specifically, in a place described in the Wolchitseed language as the Little Crossing Over place, known as Seattle, Washington. My family comes from the Winnebago tribe and the Ho-Chunk people, known as the people of the Big Voice. Yeah, I was invited to share about ICWA. I just want to echo all of what Katerina shared before about what ICWA is and why it's so important. I just had a conversation earlier today with somebody about what ICWA is, and I got the opportunity to practice for what I'm about to share with you. But in explaining it, I keep hearing this language of ICWA being described as like the gold standard for child welfare, basically. And I think that's so true, that it sets that, because it prioritizes Indigenous people's decisions and Indigenous people's sovereignty to decide what happens to their children. And I think it's so deeply personal to me because it was established in the 1970s, but my mother was born in 1965 and was placed into the foster care system when she was just 3 years old. So before ICWA was firmly established. And the reason she was placed into the system was because her mom was told that she had cancer and that she would not survive. So my grandmother, my kunika, put all of her kids up for adoption. She brought them to the Indian mission, the Catholic mission on the res. And they said, we can take all these kids except for your two youngest, which included my mom, the youngest, and then my aunt. And because of that, they were like, they're just going to have to go into the foster care system. And as soon as they were placed in the foster care system, there were tons and tons of white Christians who wanted them to come live with them. I remember my mom telling me the story about how she ended up with a specific family, but all of her parents, her white parents, their cousins were all like, oh, I wanted those Indian girls. No, I wanted the Indian girls to come to me, because it was normalized as something that like they felt like they had a right to to have these Indigenous children. So my mom was placed into a white Christian family, a well-meaning family, I'm sure, but they were told over and over again that this family would give them a better life, that they would have better opportunities, that things would be better for them because they would be placed into a white Christian family. But the reality of it was that they just had a very different life. It wasn't better necessarily. In some ways, it was much worse. My mom grew up in a predominantly white culture, a Dutch white culture, didn't grow up knowing her language, her people, her family, even. She was kept, her adoptive family, they lied to them and kept them from her real family. They said over and over, like, oh, your own family doesn't want you, they don't love you, we care about you. And so it was just, that kind of behavior was enabled because that was the way it was set up before ICWA came into place. And that's why I think ICWA is so important, that I just imagine how different life would have been for my mother if she would have been given the chance to grow up with her family, within her tribe even, or within a Native family, all of the things which are ensured by ICWA, that now as as a 50-something-year-old woman, she's having to do all of the hard work of learning her language, learning the culture, learning all of it, all of which was stripped away from her by white Christians. And I think it's what's phenomenal though about it is that God continues to work within this, that God has never abandoned my mother or my family. And I think that's the strongest testament I have to why it's so important that Christians side with protecting ICWA, because it's there's so many reasons. And I think too, what I've come to understand is that it's such an intersectional issue. Intersectional because it's not just about protecting Native children. That is a good enough like endeavor in and of itself, but it's much bigger than that because it's about tribal sovereignty. And it's becoming more and more obvious how when we continue to degrade, to break down tribal sovereignty, more and more people begin to suffer. I think we see it most obviously with environmental degradation, that the same people who are in support of getting rid of ICWA are the same people who are in support of pipelines and lithium mines, the different things that are degrading our environment, that they come together to help break down tribal sovereignty. And I think for me, as I explain more about it, the more I'm passionate about showing people that it's not just about Native kids. My heart goes for Native kids. That's why I'm passionate about it. But it's once we allow Native children to thrive, once we start there, once we build from there, everyone begins to thrive. So I think that to me just helps continue to make me passionate about it. But I think more importantly, I think about all the opportunities we can continue to award Indigenous children to just be Indigenous children, to not have to worry about assimilating to another culture that's not theirs, to not have to force them into situations like my mom endured, like I endured, because we weren't given the chance to even grow up with our family, with our culture. Yeah, and so I think the last thing I'll just say really shortly is that I know Katarina will give us a little bit more steps, but for me, what I appreciate most is continuing conversations. Right now is this really tense time as we're just waiting for the Supreme Court. And it's so hard because it feels like there's nothing tangible we could do at this moment. But I just think that one of the most important things we can do is to continue talking about it, continue to center Indigenous people's voices and listen to people's stories, like my mom's stories. I just think that the more people understand it, the more Christians will join in and understand, like, oh, this is more than just kids. It's bigger than that. And so I think, yeah, continue to talk about it and continue to pray about it. I think that is one of the most powerful things we can do. If we continue to pray for it, if we continue to petition, I think that God moves in big ways. And I think we also, when we become in tune with what the Holy Spirit is guiding us to, we also can participate in bringing about God's kingdom. So that's all I have to share, but thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Busy, and for your willingness to to invite us into this work with you and to share some of your story and your mother's story as well, and the impacts of ICWA. Really appreciate it, how you broadened it and said this is important, not only for Indigenous children, but for all of these other reasons as well. We'll be sending out some more talking points and educational resources for folks, as well as Sunday school lessons and ways that you can engage in your own faith community. But for now, I think we'll transition, and I'll take the spotlight back to the larger group setting here and transition to a time of sharing from Michaela Esau, who's been on the ground in Tucson, Arizona, and learning about the Apache Stronghold struggle as our Indigenous Solidarity MVS organizer this year. So Michaela, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. So a few updates about Oak Flat. We are very excited that Mennonite Church USA has joined a diverse group of organizations in signing on to an amicus brief that will support the Apache Stronghold in their upcoming Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case. So Apache Stronghold is a group led by the San Carlos Apache who are engaged in a legal battle for Oak Flat, their sacred site. Mining rights to the sacred site were signed over to Resolution Copper, which is a subsidiary of foreign mining company Rio Tinto. And as we're waiting for the case to be heard for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, there are several action items that you can complete. One is if you live near Pasadena, California, you can mark down the week of March 20th on your calendar. We don't yet know the exact court date or what vigils and marches Apache Stronghold plans to hold, but we do know that we want to support them in those endeavors. So be on the lookout for more information about how you can participate. Another action item is to prepare your congregations and organizations to sign on to amicus briefs for the Supreme Court. If Apache Stronghold loses this case, they will head to the Supreme Court and will need our support. And if they win, there's a great chance that the US government will appeal at the Supreme Court level. So in both of those cases, we would need amicus briefs, and the timeline for these briefs won't be known until after the court case in March. But we want to start having conversations with our congregations now so we can be ready for that. And then lastly is pray. The Apache believe in the power of prayer, and we can pray for wisdom and guidance for the Apache's legal counsel, for the protection of the land, and for the safety of Apache Stronghold. So be sure that you're subscribed to the newsletter and that you like us on Facebook, because more updates will be available there as they come. So thanks.
Thank you, Michaela. And if folks have any questions or just for more information about the amicus briefs, who should they reach out to? Yeah, so you can reach out to Carol Rose, or you can reach out to me. I'll put both of our emails in the chat. So. Thank you so much, Michaela. Any just questions or comments now from the group while we're on the call? And I think Carol Rose is also on this call too, who's been a pastor, a co-pastor at Shalom Mennonite Fellowship in Tucson, closely accompanying the Apache people in this struggle to protect their sacred site. I see a question from Melissa Kelly.
Hi, I'm from Seattle Mennonite. We've already been in touch with the lawyers a while back when you guys asked for this. So I assume they'll get a hold of us when they're ready to do the amicus brief. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's great that you guys have already been in touch. There's been several kind of rounds of this as we were collecting amicus briefs to go have the case reheard. But yes, I'm sure they'll get in contact with you as things evolve. But yeah.
And Joanna, I see you have your hand raised. Yeah.
Yes, I had two questions. I had heard that there was going to be a gathering on Monday, March 20th. Did that date change, or is that up in the air?
So March 20th is the date that Apache Stronghold's lawyers have mentioned, but by that date, they mean the week of March 20th. So they don't know yet for sure the exact date. It will be sometime during that week. So right now we're just kind of at a standstill of knowing exact details.
Okay, that's helpful. And then also, I wasn't sure, is Pasadena Mennonite a repair congregation, or has there been connection there? Because I'm in San Francisco and we have some folks interested in going down, and we'd love to be in touch with people at Pasadena, just about coming that way and connecting up with them?
So yes, Joanna, that they are a member of the Repair Network. I don't know if there are any representatives on this call. I've actually had a hard time learning who replaced the two pastors, co-pastors who recently left last year, to learn. They were really active, as you know, in the Repair Network, and it was a loss for us when they left for out east. So if you know, maybe we can put our heads together after this call to reach out, because I will also be down there and organizing congregations in Fresno to hopefully have a presence that week as well. So let's put our heads together, and actually I'll put my email in the chat, and we'll be organizing as soon as we hear the dates, or even before we know the dates, we'll be organizing a California or even Pacific Southwest confluence. Wensler Nosey, the Apache Stronghold, one of the leaders, said that they've had an offer of a football stadium and they want to fill it. And so we're going to try to bring out all of the faith communities that we know and spread the word in interfaith circles as well, across California and beyond. Yeah. I see Sharon Monday has a question.
Actually, just a resource that I also shared with Katerina that I just found in our public library, right in the center. It's called Oak Flat, A Fight for Sacred Land in the American West by Lauren Redness. And I just wanted to mention that book because it was a great way to understand the whole fight for the land from a story perspective from various people in the area. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that as a source.
Thank you, Sharon. If you could put a link to that in the chat. I also heard from some other folks from Hyde Park and other congregations who've found that to be a really helpful resource to understand the Apache Stronghold struggle. So feel free to share that link. And I also just put in the chat, if you think you can join us the week of March 20th in Pasadena, I know Sharon, you might be there in person, which would be wonderful. Please reach out and let me know. And then for those of you who can't be there in person, please mark that in your calendars if you can, to be in prayer that week for that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case. So Carol's emails here in the chat, as well as Michaela's, for more questions about the amicus brief developments and needs. And we'll continue to keep you all updated as well. So just for the sake of moving into some more updates before breakout room discussions, I just wanted to share some great news with you all and to thank you. We have raised our goal and more. So woo-hoo. And I especially want to thank Anna Hoover's on this call, who's been volunteering with on the fundraising and finances side of things, really helpful. And all of you who hosted fundraisers or donated individually or spread the word about this campaign, hosted different events. This was a huge, we were blown away that we were able to raise not only $100,000, which was our goal for a matching grant, but actually almost 120,000 I heard most recently from Sherry Hostetler of First Mennonite Church of San Francisco. And they have matched, from what I understand, have matched the full amount. So we've gone over and above towards Sarah's salary, and we've been able to hire Sarah Augustine as our executive director last year. And this just gives her freedom to plan and vision and really grow the movement as she's connecting through speaking tours with so many new folks, connecting with Indigenous partners and taking our work to the next level. So super grateful for that. And cheers to everyone. I also just wanted to introduce this new keyword suggested sliding scale for annual contributions for the Repair Network, for Repair Network members. Just as you're, going through budgeting processes as a congregation, we've gotten a lot of inquiries from people saying, how much do you recommend that we allocate towards being part of the Repair Network? Because we didn't start with a set membership fee. So we, being Sarah Augustine and I as staff, decided on this sliding scale just as a kind of suggested range to aim for. We understand if you can't make that amount, and that is okay. We want you to join, and the goal is to participate in the work and to really just, you know, be involved in this community. But to value our time and, you know, to support this growing movement, we really ask for some kind of contribution and offer these kind of 1% suggestions as an opportunity to commit as a congregation and community to this work. And I also just wanted to note that we donate as a coalition 60% of all general fund donations towards our annual Indigenous repair partner. This year, that's the Apache Stronghold, who you just heard about, defending their land from a copper mining company. And we also encourage, if you've been able to develop relationships on the ground with local Indigenous partners, we also encourage direct financial contributions to those groups in your area. For a lot of communities, we recognize that may not always be possible because of your region or because of the history of forced removals or the doctrine of discovery. It may be difficult to develop those kinds of connections, in which case we offer this kind of channel through the coalition of 60% of our funds being arranged in this reparative way. So just wanted to share that as a model or guiding framework for now as we grow our repair network. And then the final announcement for now is just to save the date for our next quarterly calls. This is the only required part of the repair network, is we want to cross-pollinate and meet together and build community and solidarity. And so the next call will be April 24th, and we are still deciding on the one after that. We're going to be actually meeting in person with hopefully a Zoom option to join during our coalition's annual meeting, which this year will take place after the Mennonite Church USA convention in Kansas City. So we're exploring different options for host congregations in Kansas. And I really want to build out a kind of extended retreat time of, at least a half-day retreat that's an addendum to the coalition gathering, just for repair network members to meet, to come together, to share resources, and to deepen our relationship and learning together. So we also invite you to our monthly prayer and action hours, and I can paste a link in the chat or have Michaela do that later with the registration link to the one that's coming up this Friday, the last Friday of the month, from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, or 4 to 5 Eastern time. So I just saw Barbara asking in the chat when we suggest that sliding scale donation to be made. And I would say right now we are open to whenever you're able to make that contribution throughout the year. We don't have like a set time, recognizing some communities are in different budget cycles, but we're going to be starting to just track that as a way of accountability and just to check in and support. And I'll also be meeting during the year at least once with each repair network community. And that can just be a time to check in and answer any questions, see where you're at, and offer support and feedback as well. So really open during the year. That may change, but for now we're open each year depending on your budget cycle. So now I'd like to move to a time of breakout sessions. We wanted to take about 15 minutes or so for you all to be sharing in small groups together. I want to introduce a couple questions as kind of a guiding question for groups of 3 or 4 people. The first one, of course, is introducing yourselves. The next one, we invite you to share a story that relates to the work that you're doing as a congregation or community towards decolonization and repair. And that could be about, 4 minutes, 5 minutes each, just being aware of time. And those stories, that's really open-ended. Some of you may be at the point of just starting to create a land acknowledgement and learning what Indigenous territories you're on. Others of you may be working with people in the congregation around their inheritance, or working around putting restitution in the church budget and talking about how do we move towards reparations, or you could be talking about land return or other forms of repair. So this is really open-ended of where are you at in the journey, not just as an individual, but as a community. And what are some of the challenges or areas that you might be looking for feedback along the way? And then finally, are there any local Indigenous justice initiatives that you want to lift up just to share with others for our awareness and support in the repair network? And when we come back from the breakout rooms, I'll invite 2 or 3 people, just popcorn style, to share report backs, especially around that last question. What else should we be aware of? The Apache Stronghold started as a local Indigenous justice initiative, and that came to the national attention in this way. So we invite other partnerships as they build from the ground up, as well as the more coalition to the base forms of partnership as well. So I'm just gonna stop the sharing, and I'll put those questions in the chat for you to see. And Michaela will be sending us into some random breakout rooms. If you are driving or unable to join a breakout room, or just wanna take some time in silence, you're welcome to just stay in the main room. But really encourage you, if you're able, to join a breakout room. Feel free to start those groups, Michaela, and we'll call you back in about 15 minutes to the large group before our second hour. We'll go ahead and take a couple minutes to share any report backs from 2 or 3 people, more if we have time. What were some of the themes that came up from your breakout rooms? Feel free to share popcorn style. If people just want to raise their hand, we can call on you. Anything that you want to lift up from what you heard, any Indigenous partners or work on the ground that you want to highlight for our awareness and attention as well. I see, Barbara, you have your hand raised. Feel free to unmute and share.
It was really interesting with the 3 other folks in our group. One of the women, whose name I forgot, I think it was Mary, which I thought was intriguing, talked about a family who owned land and ended up selling it and getting some of the money to the local Indigenous community. But the other thing was intriguing is that members of the family and the Indigenous people shared stories of their life, the same time frame. I don't know if it was in the 17 or 1800s, but they talked with each other about what was happening in each of those families, which I thought would be fascinating. And Carol, who spoke from south of Vancouver, the Estuary Church is a new church, and they are right there in the midst of a tribe whose name I can't pronounce, but they are, inviting people from that tribe and have a good relationship with people in that church. And then we had Al Dewick from Fresno, who is working very, very closely with his pastor and Katrina. And he's actually in the midst of writing a book about the neoliberalism impact on Indigenous people. So there's a lot going on.
Sounds like an exciting conversation. Thank you.
It was.
Wish I was a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And welcome to those who just joined. I saw Deidre came a little bit early. We'll introduce you in a few minutes. And thank you for joining us, Deidre Whiteman. Any other responses? We'll take 1 or 2 more from what stood out from your breakout rooms. Anything that you want to highlight?
Hi, Kimberly Schmidt from Hyattsville, Maryland on Piscataway land. I was just interested to hear that some of us from progressive churches are having difficulty like getting attention on this issue because there's so many other issues that the church is already involved in and working on. And so that seemed to be a common theme that that we shared about in our group.
Thanks for sharing that, Kimberly. That common trend I've seen too. Maybe one other response from breakout rooms.
I guess I could lift up the seasons of creation, and I assume that many of you know about that, but not all. And I thought it was a Mennonite thing that happens in September, and we had 4 Sundays that were focused on some element of creation. We've done this for 5 or 6 years, but in fact, many denominations participate. There's lots of resources, and we used it this year preparatory to the Sarah Augustine campaign. Just listen to the voices was the theme. So we thought, well, this is perfect. So we made sure we had Indigenous voices in every service, and we're just struggling, as the previous person mentioned, just trying to keep it in front of the congregation rather than just a few people. So that's a good vehicle, Seasons of Creation.
Thank you for sharing that resource, Marcia. And if you have a link to share in the chat, or if others do, I welcome someone to just put that in there so we can save the chat and share these resources out later.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing and just for the open space of these breakout rooms. This is really important for us that this community can share these kinds of resources, can support one another, that it's lateral and not just kind of top down, and that we're a community that makes the way together by walking and by listening to Indigenous partners. And on that note, I want to welcome Deidre Whiteman from the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. She's the Director of Research and Education, and I met some of the staff people along with a member from Faith Mennonite Church, Christy Zabriskie, last fall, when we just walked down the block from Faith Mennonite to the headquarters of NABS, and dropped in to meet some of the staff who connected me with Deidre. So we're really excited to hear from you, and I'll spotlight you here so we're able to see your screen and your face, and I'll just make you a co-host as well. One moment. I'm having a little bit of a technical challenge finding you. If you're able to unmute amongst all of the faces.
Hello.
Oh, perfect. I'll go ahead and spotlight you. And Deidre, would you be open to just sharing an introduction to yourself, however you wish? And I guess before that, I'll just say, by way of framing, during the first hour of this call, we heard a little bit about the Indian Child Welfare Act as we've been joining together in support of ICWA, and really wanted to frame ICWA in a broader context that includes this kind of truth telling about boarding schools and the impacts of the boarding school era, which sets it in that framework of ongoing forced assimilation of Indigenous children. So it felt really important for us to hear about the work of NABS and to hear how we can support, especially the advocacy work you all are doing around a truth commission. So I'll pass it over to you, and I'll be available to just monitor questions in the chat and lift them up during the Q&A time whenever you're ready.
Hamadakiapi, Chante Washte Nape, Chiuzapi, Aishkia Machiankapi Teye, Deidre Whiteman and Makiapi, Mniwaka Oyate Matahaye. Good evening, my relatives. My name is Deidre Whiteman. I greet you all with a heartfelt handshake. I am from Spirit Lake Nation in it's Dakota, in Fort Totten, North Dakota. That's my dad's side. My mother is Meskwaki from Tama, Iowa. And I currently reside in Vermilion, South Dakota. I'm a doctorate student working on my, not working on my dissertation yet, but I'm working on some of my coursework in my program here, and I also am the Director of Research and Education for the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. I've worked in education, public health for the last, I don't know, 18 years. And I really enjoy and love the work that I do. And I got a chance to take a look at your guys' website and look at some of the objectives you guys are trying to accomplish. And I just want to say thank you for everything, you know, that you, even just this group right now, just being able to just listen to me and talk about some of the work that we're doing. I just feel really hopeful, and so I just want to say thank you all for being here. I do have a slide deck. Is it Katarina? Is that how you?
That's right. And
Okay.
sharing is enabled, so feel free to share your screen.
Okay.
Issues.
Okay. And usually, I mean, it sounds like you guys are pretty well versed on some of the issues of boarding schools. Am I correct, or do I need to skip over some things?
I'd say we're kind of at a range of levels. We probably have the majority of folks who are well versed, but for the sake of bringing those who are new to our network up to speed, it may be helpful to do a little bit of 101 work as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my, whoops. Okay, there it is.
Looks good.
All right, cool. Now, technology, it's so awesome, but so scary at the same time. You guys can see a lot. Let's see, slideshow. There we go. Okay. So like I mentioned, I am the Director of Research and Education. Previous to coming on to NABS, I was a contract worker for NABS. I researched over 70 schools across the United States. And in that work that I did, we compiled as much information as we could regarding these individual schools. So previous to me coming on in 2021, NABS had come up with a number of 367 schools. And since that time, since 2021, we've found over 511 schools that were operated in the United States. Now that doesn't include asylums, hospitals, sanatoriums. So these are just schools, quote unquote, schools that were created between the 1500s and the up until the late 1980s. So, and this number may change as well as we keep going through the research and finding more schools and talking to survivors and going to this community. So, for example, I talked to a few relatives in Idaho, and when they found out I was doing this work, they reached out to me and let me know there were 2 schools that weren't even mentioned in the Department of Interior's list. And so we actually had to go back and look through our records, and we found them. And so, like I said, so these are just numbers that they're more than likely going to increase as we move further in our research. Okay, so American Indian boarding schools, which operated across the United States beginning in the late 19th century, represent a dark chapter in United States history. Also called industrial schools, these institutions prepared boys for manual labor and farming and girls for domestic work. The boarding school, whether on or off reservation, carried out the government's mission to restructure Indians' minds and personalities by severing children's physical, cultural, and spiritual connections to their tribes. So how did this start? Part of the United States' overall attempt to kill, annihilate, or assimilate Indigenous people and eradicate Indigenous culture. So I'd like to really emphasize this policy, timeline of policy. And as a lot of you know, a lot of this, so-called policy began with, the Papal Bull, also known as the Doctrine of Discovery. And I really like to bring this up, especially when I'm talking about boarding schools and just the history of historical trauma in amongst the Indigenous communities in the Americas, because it really lays the foundation of what was to become. So I won't go through the whole timeline, but just kind of give you a glimpse of, this is where the actual, policy that we were still feeling to this day was created. And so I also like to show this graph, for Indigenous people, everything who we are and what we do in our creation stories is tied to this land. We don't have another country that we can go to. These are our homelands, and our stories go back thousands of years, and that are passed down from each family and from each tribal community. And so when we really say that we're connected to this land, that's what we truly mean. And so I really like to show this graphic just to emphasize, how our place and our knowing, our basically our genesis, was this whole vast amounts of land. And like I mentioned before, I'm 4 different tribes. So, and that happened a lot, back in the day. Our communities would intermarry. But for me, I really like to emphasize that because all 4 of my grandparents were from, were attended boarding schools. And so I always like to, when I do my introduction, I really like to bring them up because they're a part of who I am. They're a part of where I'm going in the future. And so as I share this graphic with you, just to emphasize, how our reservation system has been reduced, to barely just like merely square miles. I mean, some tribes have more than I want to say 3 million square acres, but those are like, that's just land that they can't really use or utilize. So I just wanted to emphasize this real quickly. And so when we talk about Indian boarding school policies and how, as we go through that timeline and as we see all these policies, that how American Indian people and communities were affected, they really sought to attack the most vulnerable and the most cherished, which is our children. And so I like to show this picture as well, because it really emphasizes, as you see on the right-hand side, one of the boarding schools in Canada, you see a fenced off yard, and then you see a village almost, or a community outside of that, just to so that they could get a glimpse of their children in those schools, because they weren't allowed to see them. So on March 3rd, 1891, Congress authorized the Commissioner of Indian Affairs to create legal rules that required Indian children to attend boarding schools. It also authorized the Indian Office to withhold rations, clothing, and other annuities from Indian parents or guardians who would not send and keep their children in school. Indian agents forcibly abducted children as young as 4 from their homes and enrolled them in Christian and government-run boarding schools, beginning in the mid-1800s and continuing into the 1970s. So one piece of information that we found so far, and I haven't been able to update my slides yet, because this is kind of something as a team at NABS that we found in the last 2 to 3 weeks, is that between the timeline I showed you, between when colonization first started, or when Christopher Columbus got lost at sea, up until that time, up until the mid-1800s, there was something called praying towns across the United States, or praying schools, or mission schools. And these schools were just schools that were real close to the communities. They weren't forced. They weren't, children up until that time weren't being forcibly removed from their families. So what we noticed was that these communities that had these mission schools or these praying towns had what we now know as bilingualism. So they had people from these churches from these missions go out and basically learn the language and to try to convert the Indians into Christianity. And so they created this system of bilingualism, which I found pretty fascinating because up until that point, like I'm still learning about this history. And so up until that point, there's this bilingualism that was happening. And what we found up until, I believe, 1880, one of the Commissioner of Indian Affairs saw that this bilingualism was happening and really pushed for English only at this time. And so that's what really started that movement of English only. These boarding schools, they had to be rigid. They had to forcibly remove these children from their homes. And so that's where the start of a lot of these major policies of removal from the home started. And so that's why when we refer to boarding schools, we often think of like these black and white photos. We often think of these, like what was happening, but a lot of this wasn't happening up until the 1880s. This is when that those real harsh conditions started to happen. And so, like I said, I'm sorry, some of these pictures are a little distorted, but as you see on the left side, these students who are coming in, you know, their clothing, who they were really depicted in these pictures, and that's, you know, that's their everyday attire. And then you see the process of how colonization, you know, changed them. So these are the same students almost a year after they attended these boarding schools. Again, I'm sorry, I thought I changed these pictures. If they're a little pixelated, I apologize for that. But attendance up until this time, again, like I said, wasn't mandatory up until the 1880s. After that time, they were mandatory by the United States government, regardless of whether or not Indigenous families gave their consent. Upon arrival, Native children were given Anglo-American names, bathed in kerosene, given military-style clothing in exchange for the traditional clothing, and their hair would be shaved off for boys and cut into short bob styles for girls. Children were not allowed to speak in their native languages. They were only allowed to speak English regardless of their fluency and would face punishment if they didn't. The discipline enforced at these boarding schools were severe. Punishments varied and included privilege restrictions, diet restrictions, threats of corporal punishment, and even confinement. Additionally, children were neglected and faced many forms of abuse, including physical, sexual, cultural, and spiritual. So, again, sometimes for myself, I as a person has a legacy of boarding schools, sometimes those images are hard to look at. So sometimes I just have to change the slide real fast. But trauma from these boarding schools experience does not stand alone in isolation. There's a long history of successive traumas, historical traumas, from the very first contact, like I mentioned, when Christopher Columbus got lost. So, we really like to emphasize as well that at this time, devastating losses from diseases were occurring, to which the Native population had little or no resistance. Repeated breaches of treaties and agreements, like I showed you that long policy list. I mean, these treaties and agreements with European nations and later the United States were violated, sometimes which led to wars that devastated Indian cultures, such as the massacre at Sand Creek and Wounded Knee. Then we have the Trail of Tears, forced marches to lands far from the traditional homelands. The Cherokee Nation were removed from North Carolina. The Dakota people were forced from Minnesota. I mean, all these, there's, so many other tribes that were forcibly removed from their traditional homelands. And then also being reduced to reservations, cut off from traditional sources of food, trade, and religious and cultural sites and resources. So when we think about like where are we today, and I hate to skip, like, we only have so much time together. I mean, all that information I could teach that in a whole semester long class. So sometimes it's hard to just kind of skip through these things. So I apologize if I'm skipping through some stuff, but I just really want to emphasize as well, our mission at NABS is to really lead in the pursuit of understanding and addressing the ongoing trauma created by the U.S. Indian boarding school policy. And so while I only touched on a few of those, like I said, we could talk about that in a whole semester-long class. But for time's sake, I really want to talk about where we are to this, day, how NABS was created. I'm so glad you got to see the office, Katerina. Are you located in Minneapolis?
No, I'm actually located in California, but I was there for a speaking event there locally.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. And so our team is really spread out across the United States. So like I said, I'm in South Dakota. Most of the team is in Minnesota, but our NAB CEO, she's in Washington. Teresa, who is our director of policy, she's also in Washington. And then we have relatives in New Mexico and Arizona as well. So kind of covers the very broad United States as best as we can. So NABS was formed after a national symposium in 2011. This happened after the Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, that process that happened. So advocates in the United States wanted something very similar. And so this is the reason why, NABS was formulated, because of what happened in Canada. And so our goal is to increase public awareness and cultivate healing for the trauma experienced by individuals, families, communities of American Indian and Alaska Native nations resulting from the United States boarding school policy of 1869. And so this is, I just wanted to show like our team. A couple weeks ago, we were in Washington, D.C. advocating for a bill. And then on the right side, we're meeting with Peggy Flanagan on the proclaiming September 30th as a state recognized day of remembrance for boarding school survivors. So this is some of the work that we've been, I couldn't, if I could have put a whole bunch, like 1,000 pictures of all the stuff that we've been doing, but I just wanted to show you a glimpse of the team, the people who are, hardworking behind the scenes, trying to get this legislation happening. Let's see. So the work of NABS. So we do have a membership, and anybody, we accept anyone to become a member of our coalition. And so the purpose and vision for this membership is to support the healing of boarding school survivors and descendants. We use our coalition to voice and educate others about the truth of boarding school policies, experience, and legacy. And we call for action towards justice and healing. And we use our network to share research, healing, resource, and advocacy. So I will include this link into the chat. If you, feel free, if you'd love to become a member, we would love to have you. In my department, research and education. So this has to be updated. I mean, this is from last year, so I'm working on a bunch of other things too. So, but just to kind of give you a glimpse, we've been working on gendered violence research and how it relates to our healing programs. So for example, male and female violence that's starting in boarding schools and the connection to missing murdered Indigenous people. There is a clear connection in that, and that research is going to be forthcoming. We're going to be sharing that with again, if you're a part of that membership, you'll be the first ones to hear about the research that we've been doing around that area. And then again, like I mentioned at the beginning, our ongoing research on boarding schools. So far we found 500, I believe I said 511, but this says 509. So the actual number is 500. Again, I have to update this. It is 511. From that though, we found, well, the DOI, the Department of Interior, has documented 408 schools that were governmentally funded or supported. And 89 of those are financially independent, meaning they were supported out by other means. And 12 opened after 1969. So we currently still do have 18 boarding schools operating in and around the United States. And then the boarding school curriculum. So we do have a curriculum on our website. It's for grades K through 12, and we will soon be releasing a college level curriculum. That should be coming in the coming months. And again, if you're part of that coalition, you'll be able to be the first to know when all this information is being released. Another part of one of the big projects we're working on in a department is the National Indian Boarding School Digital Archives. So we are going to house and collect and make available to descendants a digital repository of all the American Indian boarding school records in the United States. This is part of one of our strategic goals, is to really make this information available to, again, descendants in their path to their healing. This really has helped a lot of our community members find, what happened to my grandparents, or what happened to my mother. This really kind of illustrates and brings home, it makes it like real when you can hold that information in your hand to see, like, this happened to my family. And so this was one of the main goals. And so far we are able to catalog 5 schools. Again, like I said, there's 511. And so we still got a lot of work to do towards this, but our director of digital archives, his name's Stephen Curley, he's doing such a wonderful job getting as many records as he can each year. And then our healing services department. So this is something new. And again, in the time of COVID, we had to move a lot of our stuff online. But we have since December of last year, we have hired a director of healing services. And that person will be going into the communities and working with descendants and survivors and their descendants on just tools of healing. And her name is Sandy Whitehawk. I don't know if any of you have met her or familiar with her, but she is our new director of healing services, and she's going to be doing a lot of that work in the communities. And so what I put up here is what we had our virtual series last year, and all the events that we gathered and participated in last year. So just wanted to show you just a little glimpse of the work that we've been doing towards healing services. And for our policy and advocacy, I just wanted to show you some pictures of when we went back in May, when we went to the Capitol and were advocating for our bill. Let's see, and I wanted to show you quickly. Am I able to show a video on here? Okay. Okay. Let's see if I can. Can you still see my screen? Those ads get me every time. Okay. Can you hear that?
You might have to stop sharing and then reshare on the YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
Can you hear that? Oh, you can't. Okay.
First, that the department will launch the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. At no time in history have the records or documentation.
Can you hear that now?
Yes, that's coming
Okay.
through.
Of this policy been compiled or analyzed to determine the full scope of its reaches and effects. We must uncover the truth about the loss of human life and the lasting consequences of these schools. This investigation will identify past boarding school facilities and sites, the location of known and possible burial sites located at or near school facilities, and the identities and tribal affiliations of children who were taken there. I know that this process will be long and difficult. I know that this process will be painful. It won't undo the heartbreak and loss that so many of us feel. But only by acknowledging the past can we work toward a future that we're all proud to embrace.
I remember being afraid to sleep at night, fearful of the matron's son who walked the halls at night, using a flashlight to spot me in bed. He touched me like no child should ever be touched. As a little girl, those hands were huge.
We started to cry when the lights went off. We cried for our parents and our mothers. And it caught on. Pretty soon, the whole dorm, the whole wing of the dorm was wailing into the night until the next day our eyes were closed shut. We could barely open our eyes. And that crying occurred days in and days out and weeks in and out and months until toward the middle of the school year, no child ever cried anymore. A friend of mine was a favorite of an administrator who took her out of her classroom almost on a daily basis so that he could sexually molest her in his office. She showed me her arms, and I don't know if much of you who know anything about cuttings, but she had scars on both sides of her arms, and scars upon scars and scars. We know that she was trying to take the pain away from the memory of all of those sexual molestations she had. It was so bad that she developed multiple personalities. She died 5 or 6 years ago, and her stories to me is just so graphic. I knew things were bad for the boys, but I also realized that the girls suffered extremely harshly as well.
The consequences of federal Indian boarding school policies, including the intergenerational trauma caused by forced family separation and cultural eradication, which were inflicted upon generations of children as young as 4 years old, are heartbreaking and undeniable.
This has left lasting scars for all Indigenous people. There's not a single American Indian, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian in this country whose life hasn't been affected by these schools.
Our children deserve to be found. Our children deserve to be brought home. We are here for their justice, and we will not stop advocating until the United States fully accounts for the genocide committed against Native children. The time is now. Tigwitsid, Haichka, Bisha, Miigwech. Thanking you in our languages and praying that our languages come back with as much love and strength as our ancestors spoke them.
Just a second. Let me- So our Truth and Healing Commission we started this process last year of 2022, and we got so much support in the Senate, but we didn't get as much support as we had hoped. And so we're really hitting the ground running starting in January to get our bill passed this year. And we will get our bill passed this year. And so when we're talking about our like, what do we see happening with this bill, and what kind of what do we hope to accomplish from this? And so our Truth and Healing Commission bill, this is the kind of, I just briefly pointed out in these bullet points what we hope to see happen. So we would like a 5-year commission, something very similar to what happened in Canada. So this would examine the location of children, document the ongoing impacts from boarding schools, locate church and government records, hold culturally appropriate public hearings to collect testimony from survivors and descendants, institutional knowledge gathering from subject matter experts, share findings publicly, and provide a final report with a list of recommendations for justice and healing. So one of these main components that I really like to emphasize as well is that when we're holding these culturally appropriate public hearings, that we are really soliciting help from the communities where these survivors are located in, and really putting our resources into those communities, so that when these survivors are sharing their stories, they're not being re-traumatized or re-triggered by just simply sharing the most painful thing that ever happened to them in their life. And so I really like to emphasize that, because right now, I don't want to talk bad about what the DOI is doing, but what they're doing now is they're not holding very culturally appropriate spaces as they go on these tours. And so our bill will really emphasize that, is that we will utilize traditional healings from those communities, traditional protocols, especially in terms of, when you're resurfacing trauma, what kind of healing process those communities, and what kind of tools do they utilize when those things happen to their community members. And so I just wanted to share that, just that little piece of information, because this bill will really help bring that to light, and really come from a different place of understanding, so that we acknowledge and we're able to help these survivors move, I don't want to say move on, but help them move to, I don't know if move on is the right appropriate word, but being able to share their history and their knowledge, because that's part of that healing process. And so I just wanted to emphasize that real quickly. And so we get asked a lot about how can people support our bill. And so we are really seeking allies from tribes, from intertribal organizations, non-government agencies, organizations, museums, state-operated archives, college and universities with archival collections and private collections, and individuals such as yourselves. We really need help in getting and spreading the awareness on this bill. Again, I'll add in the chat, I'll put in our link to our Truth Commission bill, and in the, I'm sorry, not our website on Truth Commission, and I'll put that link in the chat so that you're able to, when you go on there, there's different pieces of information on how you can share the bill, how you can write your representatives, and who to call, and wherever you're located, we have the numbers of the people, the representatives you can call to really get support for this bill going. So like I already started mentioning, we are asking for each person to reach out to your senator and House representative to request that they support the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act S2907 and HR 5444. Request that your senators support holding a hearing on this bill and write a resolution of support for this legislation. Again, we have all the draft languages, and however you want to write in a letter of support, we have all this information and a toolkit on our Truth and Truth Commission section. And so before I close, I just wanted to share this picture with you. For me, you know, when I think about, again, we could talk all night. I mean, we could talk for the next, 6 months about this information. You can hold a class or a seminar on this. And I really want to leave you with this picture because, it depends on your perspective and how you look at things. But the way I look at this picture is I start out from the left, because to me, understanding this history, it's hard and it's devastating, especially as a descendant of someone of my relatives who've gone to these schools, and understanding my own how my own family and how it's affected our family. I mean, my family barely touch each other or say I love you, and alcoholism is rampant. But I don't want to focus on the negative things. I really like to focus on the more positive things, because my ancestors didn't just leave me with these, these bad, lasting, detrimental events. They also left me with strength and wisdom and guidance and understanding and compassion. And so when I look at this picture, I see, the hardships that these children went through, and I see it in their faces. And I think of my grandparents. And so, but as you move, as time goes, and as you move along, and as you move from to the left to the right, you start to see, see life in color, see life joyful, life happiness. So for me, even though these things are hard to talk about, when I think of my own children and my grandson, I have a grandson, he's 1 month old. I think of the future and how bright their futures can be, even though these things, we come from this long history of colonization, but we also come from this long history of strength and endurance, and that we have hope and joy in our lives. And so I like to share this picture because, it always re-energizes me in this work. This work is not easy, it's very difficult. But when I see pictures or paintings depicting this, it really inspires me. And I just wanted to leave that with you, just to, keep that in the back of your mind, that yes, these bad things have happened, and we can still work towards a better future for our children. And so I just wanted to leave you with that. And then again, I'll leave all the information in the chat box. If you have any questions, I'm open to questions now. Katerina, if that's okay, or
yes,
did you want me to say anything else?
Thank you so much.
And for some reason, I can't see anybody's face. I don't.
Yeah. Let's see, if you want to stop sharing your screen when you're ready, I can move it back to gallery view so you can see people's faces.
Oh, is anybody there? Oh, there it is. Okay, I can see everyone now.
Great. Well, first off, thank you so much, Deidre, just for your amazing presentation, and also I imagine presenting on this material, especially with your direct family connection, time and again, that's an emotional toll and a gift that you're offering to us that we don't take lightly. So thank you for your work, for your commitment, and we want to join you in it however we can. So I'll just invite folks to share your questions in the chat. And I'm just going to be filtering them, especially since this is a sensitive matter, a sensitive issue, and I'll be just filtering them and reading them out loud for Deidre. We have a lot of people in the Zoom room, so that's probably the easiest way. The first question that I saw from Sharon Monday was, is there a connection with current religious parochial mission schools and boarding schools? Do you know if there's a connection between current religious parochial mission schools and boarding schools?
Well, there's like, if they're still in existence, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, we may need more clarification on that because there's so many different kinds of parochial religious schools. I'm wondering, Sharon, if you want to clarify that, do you mean schools that are associated with, like, boarding schools with different denominations, and maybe they used to be boarding schools in the past? That's how I'm reading the question.
Yes, if the origins are that, and if those threads still continue, and even in these current schools, I imagine there's a range, but cultural sensitivity, involvement of the Native peoples in the management running of them. But there's a lot of information that comes across in the mail and that about supporting these, and so it's just a question in my mind: is this something that is being done in a way that is sensitive and run by the Native groups in the area? And I'm sure there's a range, but
Well, the only school, there's so many schools that are still in existence to this day that are either in close proximity to the reservation or on the reservation. But there is Red Cloud Indian School in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and that's a Catholic run school. And I have colleagues that work there, and they from what they've shared with me is that they struggled because they're so these individuals who are just brought up traditional Lakota, they're not Catholic at whatsoever, but they saw how the school was operating and bringing students to these schools and immersing them in Lakota language and Lakota culture, but still from more of like a Catholic perspective. But it sounds to me, based on their perspective, it's still very successful. But that Red Cloud is also doing their own research in regards to boarding schools. And so they do have their own small commission that they're doing for that school only, and the survivors and the descendants of those survivors. I don't know if that answers your question, Sharon, but that's just the one school that I know about. I know there's some in Oklahoma, in North Dakota, Michigan, and Wisconsin, but I'm not familiar with those ones. Does that help, Sharon?
Yes, thank you. It's just a question of associations and how to make sure that these organizations are being not driven by a particular religious perspective, but more from the perspective of what the different nations are asking and the ways that they want their children educated. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you. We may have one or two folks on our call from Canada and are increasingly learning and collaborating across that colonial border. And I'm sure you were tracking closely the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or the TRC, that happened up there. What are some things that you learned from the Canadian process, and what are some things that NABS is seeking to do differently?
Well, what we've learned is, of course, that commission, what we saw how, this commission played out in Canada, and we're really trying to replicate the same thing. But it's also, when I think about that, how, America is a very one of the biggest colonial empire in the world, and we're trying to, ask for this commission. Sometimes I feel and this is my own individual thinking, is that it's monument. It's so I don't know what the word is, but it's so huge and gigantic that it's like could be overwhelming. And what we saw in Canada, just to me, from my perspective, and if the people from Canada can share their experience, they weren't taking no for an answer. And that same kind of sentiment and movement here, I'd love to see that happen in the United States as well. That same, we're not accepting no, this is what we need. We need this accountability here. So that's just something that I've seen, in the past few years of what I've noticed. And then I've, kind of been reading up on, what their recommendations are, especially in terms of language, language and revitalizing the language. That really gives me a lot of hope. And here in the United States, I know Congress just passed a bill appropriating, millions of dollars towards language revitalization in Native communities. So for me, that, that's a good step, but we also need this commission as well.
Thank you for that. I see another question in the chat. It sounds like, let's see, I'll share two questions and you can choose which one you'd like to respond to, or both. One question that was messaged to me privately was, were there any students or groups of students that banded together to subvert or resist the eradication of their culture in the boarding school era? So that's
yes.
That's one question, and I'll let you respond to that, and I'll share the second one.
Okay. So again, prior to me coming on as a director, I was a contract researcher, and there was a group of 8 of us, and we met weekly, and we would share the stories that we would found. And that was one reoccurring thing that we hardly ever heard about until we dug deeper, is that there's a lot of story. I want to say at least one, we could say one story at each school. Of those 511 schools, there was at least one story about resistance, about overthrowing the administration, or just, rebelling. And, where students actually, like all students, physically left the building and didn't return. I mean, they were eventually, captured, but to me, and then just banding together and saying, no, you're not gonna treat us this way. And then having, there's some stories where parents actually, kicked down the doors and grabbed their children. So to me, those stories, I wish, we could hear more about, because, they, of course, the sentiment was, those stories weren't going to be told because they don't, they didn't want an uprising at these schools, or, the newspapers weren't going to talk about it because they wanted the students contained. They didn't want people to get inspired by these stories. But there were accounts of several stories across the United States of these uprisings. And, as researchers, when we got together and talked about this, it made us feel a lot better, because the other stories we heard, were so heartbreaking and hard to read. So those kind of stories always, gave us like hope, like, it made us feel like, yes, there was some form of resistance. We didn't just accept that this was going to happen to us. And so, yeah, so there were plenty of stories like that.
Thank you for that response, and sounds like some hopeful alternative examples along the way. Another question that came to me personally was just around how churches were in league with the federal government in collaborating around these schools. And for us, as a faith-based movement and a repair network that's grown out of the Christian church, really looking for our role in reparative justice alongside Indigenous communities today. What would be any words of advice or insight, or maybe warning, whatever you wish to offer to faith communities as they seek to move from that place of harm and, like you said, devastation, of cooperating with the government more towards a place of restoration and healing? What words would you offer this network or other faith communities as we seek to find our role?
I think exactly what you're doing now is just is listening. I think in any type of healing involvement or any kind of relationship exchange between one person to the next, we always want to feel validated by listening and hearing these stories and having that empathy and compassion. So when we talk to religious organizations, and we can see as and I'll just speak for myself again, it's just that listening component, because sometimes we'll get people who just say, well, we're going to help you with this, and they miss the whole mission. Is a part of our relationship, and a part of our healing process is that listening process as well. And so exactly what you're doing right now, I mean, I just feel honored to be here, that you guys want to sit and listen. And my grandparents were Episcopalians, and on my mom's side and my dad's side, they were Catholics. So I had that strong upbringing, but then as I got older, I went to my more traditional way. And so for me, and understanding my traditional way and my Christian way, it's always that repair of harm in terms of listening and offering compassion and empathy that really speaks to what I feel like is what's needed. Because all day we can have someone just talk at you and not really listen, and where we don't feel heard. And to me, that, like I said, building that relationship and that understanding starts with listening. And that's just small. I know, I hope that helps you. I mean, I just, I'm going to tell my team, like, just being here with you all today, how this has impacted me, that you guys just want to sit and listen to our story and hear our stories. It means a lot, truly.
Thank you for that word and for that invitation to deep listening. I think that's so important for us to hear as the church, communities that we're a part of, seek to move from that posture of control and domination, or even from a helper or fixer kind of savior mentality, to one of moving towards humility. And honestly, it's an honor for us to have you here. So we feel that honor, and yeah, just so grateful for your time and energy. And I just want to remind folks in the chat, this Friday, we're going to be dedicating our monthly prayer and action hour to praying through calling up our congressional representatives and advocating, as Deidre has shared, for this Truth and Healing Commission. So you can register at the link that I shared, or share that. It's open to the public. Anyone who wants to join. We'll take time for spoken prayers and then pray through our actions as we call up congressional representatives and offer support for that. I see some, just a comment that maybe is a good one to start wrapping up around, from Carol Johnson, sharing about the TRC in Canada, that the work continues. And I believe Carol is coming in from Canada. Canadians have a dark history. There were 7 to 9 specific action recommendations directed at churches, one of which is to denounce the doctrine of discovery. I pray that your bill will pass, and for the commission to bring to the forefront the need for justice to flow like a river. And then she shares a quote from Amos 5:24, let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream. Thank you for those words, Carol, and that resonates with the opening song that we shared in our network gathering, O Healing River, send down your waters, send your waters down. So we pray for that healing and for these steps of truth-telling and for the monumental work that you have before you with NABS. I hope you feel the support of many community partners that we're a small piece of, and we hope to continue to stay connected, Deidre. So thank you for your time. Are there any final words that you'd like to offer before we close tonight?
Please become a part of our coalition. We appreciate all the support we can get.
Thank you. Well, maybe we can come off our mics and just share any words of gratitude or thanks to Deidre and to one another for the time that we've shared this evening as we say goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deep gratitude.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you
Blessings to
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Yes, thank you.
May you feel our prayers and support.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. We'll be in touch.
Good night.
Take care.
Take care. Peace be with you.